Washington, D.C. has always been a battleground for power. But tonight, the fight wasn't in front of cameras, it was inside the White House Situation Room. The debate, the future of the U.S. Department of Education. The room was packed with powerful figures, advisors, lawmakers, decision-makers. The tension was thick. President Donald Trump, his red ties slightly askew, leaned forward, his voice firm. Do we keep or dismantle the Department of Education? Silence filled the room. Elise Stefanik, a young and ambitious politician, straightened her blazer before sliding a thick binder across the table. Mr. President, this isn't about ideology, it's about math. 45 years since this department was created. Our education system has only declined. Spending has gone up. Results have plummeted. Why are we still funding failure? She flipped open the first page, revealing cold, hard statistics, falling test scores, plummeting satisfaction rates, and skyrocketing costs. Senator Chuck Schumer frowned, shaking his head. Elise, you're cherry-picking numbers. Education isn't something you can measure with a few charts. His voice was sharp, but the frustration was evident. Elise's smile was razor-sharp as she flipped to another page. Gallup 2024. Only X% of Americans are satisfied with the Department of Education, while 55% are completely dissatisfied. A system that burns through billions but delivers nothing but disappointment. Why are we keeping it? She tilted her head, daring Schumer to refute the facts. Schumer crossed his arms and exhaled heavily. What's your solution? Hand everything over to the states and hope for the best? Do you even understand how federal funding keeps these schools running? Elise let out a quiet, knowing laugh. The problem isn't the money, Chuck. It's what happens to it after it goes through the bureaucratic meat grinder you're so desperate to protect. If the Department of Education were a private company, it would have gone bankrupt long ago. Trump leaned back, smirking. When a business fails, we don't throw more money at it, we cut it loose. Simple. His gaze swept across the room, reading the reactions. Some nodded in agreement, others looked visibly uneasy. Schumer took a slow, measured breath, as if restraining himself. You're playing a dangerous game. Elise leaned in, her voice a near whisper, sharper than ever. No, we're fixing a broken system. And you know it. The room fell silent. The war wasn't over, but the momentum had shifted. The air was thick with tension as President Donald Trump surveyed the room filled with lawmakers and top advisors. He leaned forward, his voice firm. Do we keep or dismantle the Department of Education? Silence. Elise Stefanik, poised and confident, slid a thick folder across the table. Mr. President, 45 years since this department was created. Our education system has only declined. Spending goes up, but the results? We're ranked 40th in the world. Chuck Schumer frowned, shaking his head. Elise, you're cherry-picking data. Education isn't something you measure with a few charts. Elise flipped a page, her gaze unwavering. Gallup 2024. Only a fraction of Americans are satisfied with the Department of Education. 55% are completely dissatisfied. A multi-billion-dollar machine delivering nothing but failure. Trump crossed his arms and motioned to an aide. A large screen blinked to life, displaying a brutal global education ranking. He gestured toward the numbers. We're 40th, but guess where we're number 1? Silence. A few exchanged glances. Trump smirked. Spending. We spend more per student than Norway, Sweden, even China, who, by the way, are in the top 5. And what do we get? A disaster. Schumer gritted his teeth. You can't just look at numbers and make reckless decisions. Education is the foundation of this country's future. Elise scoffed. No one is arguing that. Chuck, but $80 billion a year for a failing system? If the Department of Education were a private company, it would have gone bankrupt years ago. Schumer slammed his hand on the table. Public schools are the backbone of America. You people want to tear it all down? Trump shook his head, his voice dripping with sarcasm. No one's tearing anything down. Chuck, we're just not pouring money into a broken system anymore. A Republican lawmaker spoke up from the corner of the room. Senator Schumer, remind me, how did we manage before 1979? Because last I checked, schools didn't spontaneously combust. Elise smirked, arms crossed. In fact, our schools were better before the Department of Education even existed. Schumer clenched the armrest of his chair, his frustration evident. The fight wasn't over. But the momentum had clearly shifted. The room was tense. Elise Stefanik sat across from Chuck Schumer. Her expression calm, almost amused. I don't need to pretend anything. Chuck, the numbers speak for themselves. Her voice was steady. Before 1979, education funds went straight to the states. And guess what? It worked. Schumer's fingers drummed against the table. He knew where this was going. Instead of letting states allocate funds, we got a bloated, corrupt bureaucracy. Elise spread her hands. And now, you're shocked people want to change it? Trump chuckled. I love these moments. They scream about protecting schools. But the second you point out they worked better before DC got involved, they suddenly forget history. Schumer wasn't done. He went full theatrics. This is one of the most destructive things Trump has ever done. Who suffers? America's children. Also, he can give tax breaks to billionaires? Trump leaned back, smirking. Billionaires? Oh no, they're coming. A few laughs from the conservative side. Elise remained still. Schumer straightened. Public schools are the bedrock of this country. Elise finally moved, folding her hands. Chuck, nobody's shutting down public schools. Just the incompetent federal bureaucracy controlling them. Trump nodded. You hear, cut the Department of Education, and act like we're banning math. Schools will still exist, except now they might actually be better. The doors slammed open. Randi Weingarten stormed in, eyes blazing. She yanked out a chair. Sat down hard. This is an attack on America's children. Elise barely blinked. Randi, so nice of you to join us. Weingarten ignored her. You're taking opportunity from kids who don't have it. Billionaires' kids will be fine. What about the 90% who rely on public schools? Schumer jumped in. Exactly. Weingarten cut him off without a glance. Even Trump raised an eyebrow. This isn't just policy. It's personal. Elise exhaled. No, Randi, you're on emotions. Weingarten's face darkened. I'm angry. Elise's brow lifted. Oh, we noticed. Trump leaned over to an aide. First Schumer. Now this. We should sell tickets. Conservative chuckles. Weingarten pressed on. You think this is funny? Elise finally leaned forward. No, I think facts matter. You say teachers need more support? Sure, but tell me, where does $80 billion go every year? Because it's not making it into classrooms. Weingarten started. That money. Elise cut in. That money vanishes into a bureaucratic black hole. You act like Trump's burning schools to the ground. But that's not what's happening. Is it? Silence. One of Trump's aides chuckled. Hell of a metaphor. Weingarten exhaled sharply. You're simplifying a complex issue. Elise smirked. No, I'm clarifying a bureaucratic scam. And just like that, the momentum was hers. The air was thick with tension. Elise Stefanik sat back, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Maybe if we actually empowered states to run their own schools instead of making them dance around federal red tape, we wouldn't be ranked 40th in the world. Her voice was calm, but the words hit like a hammer. She let the silence stretch, then turned to Randi Weingarten. So, Randi, tell me, where exactly is that $80 billion going? Silence. Weingarten's fingers curled against the table. Across the room, Trump smirked. I'll tell you where it's not going, anywhere useful. A few chuckles rippled through the conservative side. Weingarten stayed quiet this time. Elise simply smiled. The Situation Room had become a battlefield. Chuck Schumer was back on his feet. Tie loosened, frustration boiling over. He jabbed a finger across the table. You're playing with the future of this country. Elise. She didn't blink. She leaned back, arms crossed, exuding the kind of quiet confidence that only made her opponents angrier. Then, with deliberate precision, she replied, No, Chuck, I'm saving the future of this country from a system that's been bleeding it dry. The room went completely still. Even Trump, who had spent most of the debate smirking, let the silence breathe. Then Elise leaned in, her voice dropping just enough to make everyone instinctively listen closer. You know what the difference is between you and me, Chuck? You think the solution to every problem is more money, even when the money isn't working. I think the solution is fixing what's broken. Schumer opened his mouth, but Elise didn't give him the chance. We already know what happens under your leadership. It's happening right now. Billions of taxpayer dollars vanish into a black hole of bureaucracy. And nothing gets better. She shook her head, voice tinged with disbelief. Where does the money go? Chuck, what on earth are we spending it on? Because I'll tell you what it's not doing, fixing American education. A few heads nodded around the room. Schumer exhaled sharply, adjusting his jacket. We're investing in the future. Elise let out a low, knowing chuckle. Oh, is that what we're calling it now? Investing. She gestured broadly. Because to me, it looks more like setting billions of dollars on fire and hoping for a miracle. Trump grinned. It's called government efficiency, Elise. And as we all know, Democrats love efficiency. Just look at the DMV. More laughter. Even some undecided advisors cracked a smile. Elise turned her focus back to Schumer. You've had decades to fix this. Chuck, decades. And yet, here we are, 40th place in the world. So tell me again, why should anyone trust you to fix it now? Schumer's fingers twitched against the edge of the table. He had no answer. Elise let the silence sit for a moment, then gave a small, satisfied nod. And that is exactly why America voted for President Trump. Trump leaned forward, nodding approvingly. Couldn't have said it better myself. Chuck. Schumer sank into his chair. Jaw tight, mouth a thin line. The battle wasn't just over. Elise had won it. And then, the doors swung open. Randi Weingarten stormed in. She didn't walk, she marched, her heels clicking like the drumroll of an impending storm. Without hesitation, she yanked out a chair, sat down hard, and locked eyes with Elise. Her expression a mix of outrage and raw disbelief. This is an attack on America's children. Elise barely blinked. Randi, so nice of you to join us. Weingarten ignored the pleasantries. She slammed her hands on the table. You people are taking opportunity away from kids who don't have it. Billionaires' kids will be fine, they have private schools, tutors, every advantage money can buy. But the 90% of American children who rely on public schools, what happens to them? Schumer, still smarting from his earlier defeat, seized the moment. Exactly. Weingarten lifted a hand, cutting him off without even looking at him. Even Trump raised an eyebrow. This isn't just policy, she continued, voice cracking with intensity. It's personal. I care about these kids. And you're treating them like numbers on a budget spreadsheet. Elise let out a slow breath, like a chess player who had anticipated this move a mile away. No, Randi, you're on emotions. Weingarten's face darkened. I'm angry. Elise lifted a single eyebrow. Oh, we noticed. Trump leaned toward an advisor. First Schumer. Now this. We should start selling tickets. Laughter again. But Weingarten pressed on. You think this is funny? Elise didn't waver. No, Randi, I think facts matter. She leaned forward. You say teachers need more support? Sure, but tell me, where exactly do you think $80 billion is going every year? Because it's sure as hell not making it into the classrooms. Weingarten's jaw tightened. That money vanishes into a bureaucratic nightmare. Elise interrupted. You and Schumer act like Trump is going to march through America with a flamethrower, burning down every public school in sight. But that's not what's happening. Is it? Silence. One of Trump's advisors let out a low chuckle. Now that is a hell of a metaphor. Weingarten exhaled sharply. You're simplifying a complex issue. Elise smirked. No, I'm clarifying a bureaucratic scam. A lone hand rested on the table. The chief advisor's voice was steady. We have enough information. All eyes turned to Trump. He didn't rush. He let the moment breathe. Surveying the room, some triumphant, some defeated, some still caught in between. Then, slowly, deliberately, he spoke. The Department of Education will be abolished. A beat. Then applause. It wasn't wild, but it was sharp, decisive, filled with approval. Schumer stared at the table, fingers interlaced, as if holding on to something already slipping away. Weingarten shook her head. You people have no idea what you're doing. Trump glanced at her, then at Schumer, and in that casual, Trumpian way, he shrugged. Oh, I think we do. The meeting was over. That night, as the news broke across the country, Elise sat in her office, scrolling through reactions. The debate was raging, some furious, some elated, but one thing was undeniable. This wasn't just talk anymore. It was happening. She leaned back, allowing herself the briefest moment of satisfaction. One more promise kept. One more bureaucratic disaster cut loose. She reached for her phone and tapped out a quick post. It's done. The Department of Education is history. But this is just the beginning. Follow along, because we're not stopping here. She hit send. Then, with a final glance at the headlines, she smirked. This was only the first domino to fall.